the impetus for change is worrisome to me. I've talked to my peers in organizations about safety and quality, and sometimes I feel as if other healthcare executives have become very frustrated with honest attempts to change but not seeing the results they would like to see. And I think out of that frustration, some people have walked away from their obligation to the public. I think in some cases they believe they're doing better than they actually are, so actually measuring patient harm is difficult to do. And there's no good benchmark data on how one hospital compares to the other. But when you pull charts, you'll see harm. So in some cases, maybe it's just a false affirmation we're doing better than we really are. And then I think that our industry hasn't been held accountable. So you have these really public studies, but nobody then immediately goes and looks to see, well, let's really go look and see what's going on in the state. Let's don't pat ourselves on the back in Massachusetts and say we're one of the best states in the country because we have such incredible academic facilities in this state. Why don't we actually go look at the data? Why don't we go look at the data online and see how many hospitals in the state have too many pressure ulcers? How many hospitals in the state have infection rate problems? Why don't we go look into Leapfrog to see how many hospitals in the state don't have an A in safety and Leapfrog, and how long have they not had an A? Well, if you go look at the data, you'll find 50% of the hospitals in the state of Massachusetts have a B or a C in safety. And even if you're an A in Leapfrog, you're still not safe. Signature had gone through 6 years in a row of A's before we started working on serious safety events, and then dropped our rate by 80%. So I take A as like the minimum standard expected by the public, not a really high standard. Half the hospitals in the state of Massachusetts are B's or C's. Their boards haven't fired their CEOs. The state hasn't come in and said, you have to fix this. If it was a school system, the state would have taken over the management of the school system and replaced the superintendent, but that doesn't happen in healthcare. I think the impetus, for one, has to be media's got to push on healthcare. State regulators have to decide patient safety is actually really important. And then you look at the state of Massachusetts, if you were to pick up the globe over a year's period of time and look at healthcare articles, and if you judged what was important to the state of Massachusetts based on articles, I think you would come down with 2 or 3 things. Cost of healthcare is really important. And we formed an entire part of the government to look at whether or not cost growth is higher than the benchmark. Merging with other facilities to get bigger is really important. And new innovation in healthcare is really important. Those 3 things, you would say on any given day, is what drives healthcare in the state of Massachusetts. And then once every 3 or 4 years, somebody will say, oh, but safety is an issue. It's the 3rd leading cause of death, but it doesn't get any attention. And I don't think we have impetus for change until the media steps up and begins to do some yeoman's work at holding hospitals and healthcare facilities accountable. And I think we ought to be accountable. If you were in the drug industry, in the airline industry, if you're manufacturing airplanes, you would be dragged in front of the Congress to be held accountable. I think that we should be accountable. Most of American hospitals started as nonprofits by communities, aimed at taking care of the community, assets that belong to the community, and we're the will of the community and part of the state. I don't know why we're not held accountable, other than healthcare is really complex and it's hard for people to get their heads around. But I don't think the industry changes until we are accountable to our public that we take care of.